If you missed our discussion last week, we read through these verses, but we focused on the idea that there are multiple views of this long passage. We're going to hear Jesus talking about destruction and judgment that's coming upon Jerusalem. You're going to hear this phrase, the end of the age, right? His disciples asked him a question about the end of the age and when these things are going to happen. And so there's a lot of debate among Christians, and has been for a long time. Was Jesus talking about the destruction of the temple in 70 AD? Or is he talking about something in the future? And we covered different views last week. I'm going to try to not have that whole discussion again. But very quickly, we said there's the preterist view, which the full preterist view would say all of that stuff. Jesus was only talking about 70 AD. Everything we're going to read today has already been fulfilled when Jerusalem was taken over by the Romans in 70 AD. That's what he was talking about, and it's all been done. It's all finished. Everybody good there? That'd be a full preterist view. Then we said there's also partial preterists. In other words, some of this stuff was fulfilled when the temple was destroyed, and then some of this stuff is about the future. Okay? There's the full futurist view, which is like all of this stuff. Jesus was talking about future things. I think that's I shared my opinion last week. I said I think that's going too far. I think definitely some of what he's talking about applies to the temple and the destruction of the temple. And I feel confident some of it applies to much more than that, and there's still future fulfillment. So we talked about these two views, which are kind of similar, but not quite the same. Some people are partial preterists. In other words, they think this part's been fulfilled, this part hasn't been. And they kind of separate, Okay, so some of us here might say, oh yeah, that's kind of what I think. That's not quite exactly the same thing as the dual fulfillment or double fulfillment view, which is not so much separating this has been fulfilled and this hasn't. Rather, I think some of the parts are this has been fulfilled, but will still be fulfilled in an even greater way also in the future. Does that make sense? So those aren't quite the same thing. Does everybody understand the difference there? So anyway, that's kind of where I lean, kind of a dual fulfillment kind of view. I think definitely a lot of what he's talking about applies to the temple, and it's going to be fulfilled in an even greater way in the future. We kind of took a poll last week. No fights broke out or anything. It was all right. But that's kind of what we discussed last week. We didn't really dig into the passage very much. We read it, but we didn't really dig into, okay, what's actually being said, right? We only highlighted certain phrases that we noticed that helped us see, hey, in my case, I pointed out some verses that show me that I think there's still future fulfillment on some of these things. I don't think that all could have applied to 70 AD. So I highlighted certain verses, but we didn't really go through slowly. Today, it's still going to be a little, what's the word? A little touchy or dicey in terms of understanding it fully, because there's a lot of different views about these things. But I hope that in the end, I'll try to wrap us up at the end of our hour today with some simple takeaways that I think we can have full confidence in, even if some of us right here in this room may have some different views about some of these things. Does that make sense? Because even if we got some different views on some of the details, I think there are some things that we should be like for sure about and happy to rejoice in. And where our confidence should be. So we'll wrap up with some thoughts on that. Okay, let's go. Matthew chapter 24. We're going to start at the beginning. We kind of covered this last week, but I'm going to reread it. As Jesus left and was going out of the temple complex, his disciples came up and called his attention to the temple buildings. Quick pause. We went and read in Mark. Specifically, they're talking about how amazing the buildings are. Look at these wonderful buildings, basically. Verse 2. Then he, Jesus, replied to them, "Don't you see all these things? I assure you, not one stone will be left here on another that will not be thrown down." Now, this part, I think, is very clear. He's talking about the temple. I think very clearly this part is definitely talking about the destruction of the temple. And for those that don't know, that actually happened a few decades later in the year 70 AD. Everybody good there? So this part's pretty clear. But then they ask a question, and this is where all the different understandings come from. While he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples approached him privately and said, "Tell us, when will these things happen?" Now, does everybody agree? They're referring to what he just said. Okay, so their question definitely has to do with that destruction of the temple. But also they throw on there, "And what is the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Now that sounds like that can be a much bigger question, not just about the destruction of the temple. In case you weren't here last time, we said the reason there's so many different opinions is a couple of different things. Some people are reading this and think, hey, this much has already happened, this much hasn't. Another reason there's debates is certain people read very literally and other people read it more figuratively. Well, that's going to affect how you understand what's being talked about also, right? So that's why there's different views on this. Then Jesus replied to them, verse 4, "Watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Messiah,' and they will deceive many. You are going to hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, because these things must take place. But the end is not yet. For nation will rise up against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these events are the beginning of birth pains." Let's pause here. So a lot of times people will read this. Again, some people are going to read this. He's warning them about the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. Other people are going to read this like saying, no, this applies to us because there's going to be a greater fulfillment of these things, right? So we should take these warnings too. Now, for right now, let's just say, hey, this is for us right now. We'll discuss a little bit later, but this is for us, applies to us. Still we need to listen to these words of Jesus. They still apply to us today. Let's talk about what these things mean. It says, "For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Messiah,' and they will deceive many." Let's talk about how this plays out even today. Are y'all aware that throughout history, and even in fairly recent history, there have been people that have, in modern history, who have declared that they are the second coming of Christ? Did y'all know this? There's cults today that have been established because the leader of that cult said, "It's me. I'm back. I'm Jesus." That Jesus that y'all read about right there, I'm here. I've arrived. I'm the second coming. Okay? I should have prepared some of the names. I can't remember. Let's see. Anybody aware of some of these? Anybody know what some of these are? Have you ever heard of some of these cults? Okay. Did he say he was the second coming of Christ? Okay. The Branch Davidians, by the way, that ended, you can go read about that. That was Waco, right? Yeah, y'all can go read about the Branch Davidians. That ended terribly for them. And he was not Jesus, okay? Now, after the fact, listen, this is, I'll come back to the comment I'm going to make. Anybody know of some other ones? Jim Jones, yeah, Jonestown, now I can't remember, you'll have to help me. Did he say he's the second coming of Jesus? I don't know if he said that. I know there was some Christian teaching mixed in with a bunch of weird beliefs also. I don't know if he said he was the second coming of Christ or not. I'm not sure. It's possible though.
I actually met the leader in one of these that said he was Jesus.
Okay.
And I can't remember his name. It was out of some part of California.
Okay.
I was hoping somebody would say the name.
And how far back was this?
Probably about 30 years ago.
Okay. And did you punch him in the face and say, "No, you're not"? No? What was your reaction at that time? When you heard that, what did you think?
I mean, it was a weird story. I mean, I met some people who were following him
Okay.
as well. And it was just before I went off to college.
And were you a Christian at that time?
Yes.
Okay. So you were already a believer, and then you heard that there's this dude saying he's the second coming of Jesus. And what did you think of that?
Oh, I obviously thought that was crazy.
Okay.
But I was interested in how the people around him were responding because they were really nice people.
Mm-hmm.
And they were genuine people. And they were genuinely deceived.
Right.
And so that was very strange to me how that could happen.
So listen to this. This is very important. Can we keep that door shut, please? Charlotte said a key phrase that I want everybody to, she said they were very genuine people, but then she said they were genuinely what? Deceived. This is very important for us as believers to understand. There are people who wholeheartedly believe false things. So they're genuine in the sense that they really believe it. That doesn't make it true. And this is something that we even as Christians have to grapple with. And some people may come to us with this issue even against us and say, well, you believe all that stuff, but that doesn't make it true. And they're correct. Us believing it does not make it true. Okay? That's very important. You and I could be, like this could all be lies. And we believe it, but it's lies. Now, obviously, I'm thoroughly convinced for all kinds of different reasons Jesus is the truth. But you get the others could bring up that same issue. Just because we believe it doesn't mean it's true. Hopefully we should be believing what is true, but believing it doesn't make it so. Okay, now, in case y'all don't know, this is a cool, or at least cool to me. The Bible actually says that. There's I think it's 1 Corinthians, maybe chapter 15. I could be wrong. Where Paul writes, if Christ was not raised, have you ever heard this before? Your faith is meaningless. Your faith is worthless. In other words, if it didn't actually happen, if it's not actually true, us believing is meaningless. So notice it says here, back in the verse that we read, and back to a word that Charlotte mentioned, it says, for many will come in my name saying, I am the Messiah, and they will what? They will deceive many. And that's exactly what Charlotte mentioned. They were deceived, genuinely deceived. Jesus warned that this would happen, and it did happen back in his day, in the decades right after this. It continues to happen even today. So are we seeing some of the dual fulfillment kind of thing? Like this happened right after him and continues to happen and continues to grow. I could be wrong, but man, I can't remember for sure. Does anybody know the Light of the World Church, La Luz del Mundo? I think their founder may also claim to be the second coming. Have you heard that? Sure. Okay, yeah. Their founder, I think it was founded, is it in Florida? I can't remember where it was founded. But I think he claims to be the second coming of Christ also. Anyway, but this is very important. We're going to continue reading. We're going to see when I think Jesus' words show us, when he comes again, everybody's going to know it. Okay, we're going to read some of what he says. So he specifically says, many will come in my name. They will deceive many. It's deception. Whenever people say, oh, there's the Messiah, it's deception. Okay? We'll keep going. He'll cover this later. Verse 6, you're going to hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are what? Not alarmed. This is very important to me. Because even right now, some people will hear about wars even right now. Like this, like right now. Not even modern day. I mean like today. Today, wars in the Middle East, right? And people get real scared. And they think, oh man, it's that end time stuff that the Bible talks about. Like it's about to go down. And they get scared. Jesus specifically says what? Do not what? Do not be alarmed. So listen, even if what's going on right now is fulfillment of these things, his command is still don't be alarmed. This should be a big deal to us. Okay? We're not supposed to fly off the handle and get all crazy and scared, and you know what I mean? Because the end is happening. Even if it is about to happen, his command is do not be alarmed. Okay? Now, actually, I think his words say that doesn't mean it's the end. Look what it says next. See that you are not alarmed because these things must take place, but, what does it say right there? But the end is still to come. The end is, my translation says not yet or still to come. What translation is that one?
This is NIV.
NIV. Any other translations? How do they word it there at the end of verse 6?
Won't follow immediately.
The end won't follow immediately?
Not yet.
The end is not yet? The end is yet to come. Okay, I think it's clear that's not the end. When you hear the wars, the rumors of war, that's not the end. But it's still, it's still to come. For nation will rise up against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these events are the what? Beginning of birth pains. Okay, so these things are the beginning. Now, I have to point this out because I think it's worth. We're trying to understand, like, what is Jesus talking about? Have these things been fulfilled, or are they still to come? I don't know if everybody would agree. I think these things have been continually happening throughout all of human history. Every generation. There's wars. There's rumors of wars, right? There's kingdom rising up against other kingdoms. There's powers going against other powers. A new empire arises, right? In Jesus' day, it was Rome. Rome was the world power, but eventually that kingdom collapsed and another power rises up, right? I think this stuff just repeatedly is happening, okay? So I personally, this is me, I think even right now, what's going on in the Middle East, I don't see it and I don't get all like, oh, this is the one. Because it's been happening. And generations and generations of Christians before us have seen these kinds of things happening and gotten worried. And say, this is it. The end is coming. The end is like, it's here, you know? And I don't mean it mean, but they've been wrong repeatedly. When they get really confident that the end is there, it doesn't happen. And they've been wrong repeatedly. So I just mentioned that we should have some humility and not act like we got it all figured out. You know, we should be humble about it and say, okay, I see some stuff, but Lord, I think we'll come back to it. I think it's actually good that we say, but I don't know. We'll come back to why. Okay, then, remember, Jesus is saying this to his disciples, and it definitely has to apply to them. It can also apply to us, but it has to apply to them. It says, then they will hand you over for persecution, and they will kill you. Now, quick pause. Does everybody know what happened to the apostles? They became martyrs. Yeah, that's what happened. They went around preaching Jesus. They got in trouble. They were arrested, beaten, and killed. Right, except John. That we know of, John was the only one able to live, die of old age. Okay. He says, you will be hated by all nations, specifically because of my name. Okay, so because they're carrying the message of Jesus and preaching Jesus. Then many will take offense, betray one another, and hate one another. Many false prophets will rise up, and there's that word again, deceive many. Okay, now, we already read about false messiahs. Now we're hearing false prophets. Now, I think the distinction is they're not saying they're Jesus, but they're preaching in the name of Jesus falsely. Right? So I think that's a false prophet rather than a false Messiah. Okay, then verse 12. Because lawlessness will multiply, the love of many will grow cold. Now let's pause. What does lawlessness mean? What is it? Wickedness? Sin. Justifying sin. Ah. Any other words? Very good. Yeah, doing what's right in your own eyes. So when everybody, I think this is a good way for us to think about it, especially, and it's especially relevant in our culture today. When everybody has their own law, that's lawlessness. There is no law. That's not a law at all. When it's up to you, you know what I mean? My law's up to me, your law's up to you, and there's no law. That's lawlessness. When everybody does what they want, right? And so I agree, sin. Now, quick history lesson. We live right now, modern American culture. Have you ever heard of postmodernism? Postmodernism arose, oh man, I could be getting the decades wrong. I think it goes all the way back to probably the 1960s, 50s. I think became more prominent in the 70s. But one of the ideas within postmodernism is basically that all truth is relative. What you think, Tracy, what you think, that's true for you. And I could believe something totally different. And guess what? That's true also for me. Okay. Biblically, I know this might sound mean, but everybody here, if you're a follower of Christ, you need to know that's stupid. That's not what the Bible teaches. That's not how Jesus talked about things. He did not say, like, I'm a truth, but if, you know what I mean? Like, things, and the way that God deals with humanity, you see it throughout all the scriptures. God tells us, no, this is my way. This is my command. This is what you should do. This is, you know what I mean? This is how I interact with you. This is, this is how you live as my people, and this is how you don't. You know what I mean? He gives us do's and don'ts, and it's not, but whatever you think. That's not, the Bible very much teaches that truth is not relative, that it is objective. There are objectively true things and objectively false things. Now, obviously, some people disagree with the Bible, but I'm saying if we're followers of Christ, and if we believe this is God's word, we should be people who believe in objective truth. Now, sometimes that doesn't mean we're right about everything. You know, I could still be wrong in how I understand something in God's word or all that. But there is an objective truth. And we're trying to be guided by the Lord, guided by his Spirit in understanding what he has to say to us. Make sense? Okay, so it says lawlessness will multiply. Back to what I was saying about the history thing. I think we are very much in an era right now of widespread lawlessness in our culture. Okay? Now, that's, for some people, that's what fuels people to say, oh man, we're close. The end is like, it's close. But throughout history, if you look throughout history, it's kind of done that. It kind of goes like this. There's been times like this before with tons of wickedness. Now, one evidence, I believe, one evidence that we are particularly in a time of more widespread lawlessness than the norm. I look at Romans chapter 1, and I think about everything that our culture teaches concerning sexuality. And I think that's one of the signs that we're in one of those times of extreme lawlessness. Okay? Do we need to go read it? Some of y'all haven't read Romans chapter 1. Let's go take a look real quick. In Romans chapter 1, Paul writes about this pattern that the Gentile world has followed. Remember, God revealed himself in the Old Testament to the Israelites and to those who are not Israelites also. It's not just the Israelites. But as a nation, he revealed himself to them, made his will and his word to them very clear. They still did not follow him. But I'm going to read, starting in verse 18. Verse 16. I'll read from verse 16. And then we'll go to the end of the chapter. Paul writes to the Christians in Rome, he says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is God's power for salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew and also to the Greek." That's a famous verse, and it's a famous verse for a good reason. We should never be ashamed of the gospel. Okay? And the reason we can't be ashamed of the gospel, Paul says, because it is God's power for salvation. In other words, this message, this gospel, is the way that God saves people. How can you be ashamed if that's the way that God saves people? By this gospel being shared with them, you know? So he says, I'm not going to be ashamed of the gospel. That's God's power for salvation to everyone who believes. Now, verse 17, "For in it God's righteousness is revealed from faith to faith, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith." That's a quote from the Old Testament. Then it says, "For God's wrath is revealed from heaven against all godlessness and unrighteousness of people who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. Since what can be known about God is evident among them because God has shown it to them." Now, listen to this. I've shared about this before. This passage completely changed my mind concerning how to interact with atheists. I used to think they have a hard time believing. There's these intellectual stumbling blocks, and I have to answer all their questions perfectly, and then they'll believe. I'll convince them. God's word says they already know. Listen to what it says here. It says, they suppress the truth. It says, since what can be known about God is evident among them because God has shown it to them. What does he mean? Well, verse 20, "For his invisible attributes, that is, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen since the creation of the world, being understood through" what? Through what he has made. In other words, creation. Right? That all of creation, you can see his invisible attributes, specifically his eternal power and his divine nature. In other words, creation shows us somebody did this. Somebody incredibly powerful. Somebody not like us. God made this, right? It says, as a result, what does that end of verse 20 say? They're without excuse. I thought they had an excuse. I thought, well, they just don't understand. Maybe nobody's ever explained it good to them. Maybe nobody's ever answered all their questions. Maybe God says they're without excuse. He's revealed himself already through creation. And it says that his invisible attributes have been clearly seen. So it's not even veiled. It's not even hidden. The conclusion that God is real is supposed to be the natural default conclusion that humanity comes to when we just take a look around. Now, verse 21 says, "For though they knew God, they did not glorify him as God or show gratitude." Did everybody hear that? So they know there's a God, right? That's what he was just saying. They know there's a God. They're without excuse. They know. But even though they know, they didn't glorify him or show gratitude. Now, this is important. I just mentioned this on Sunday. I'm sorry. I'm terrible about interrupting myself. I'm supposed to be getting to a point, but there's a lot of little points on the way. I mentioned this on Sunday. Notice it says they knew God, but they did not glorify him or show gratitude. Just believing that God is real does not mean you're in right standing with him. Everybody with that? This is super important. Just believing that he is real does not mean you're in right standing with him. Okay, they knew God, but they didn't glorify him, didn't show gratitude. Instead, their thinking became nonsense, and their senseless minds were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man, birds, four-footed animals, and reptiles. Let's pause. Their thinking became, my translation says nonsense. What does y'all say in verse 21 there? Futile. What else? Worthless. And then mine says their senseless minds were darkened. How does y'all say it? Their foolish hearts were darkened. Okay. Their senseless hearts. Now, I want to talk about nonsense and senseless minds. I wasn't really expecting to be controversial today, but let's do it. Right now, in modern American culture, we have people saying that people walking around with penises are women. And that people, right? I know it sounds, I'm not trying to be callous, but this is a fact. People are saying this. And that women who have been women their entire lives, have breasts, a vagina, all that, no, that's a man. Doesn't that sound senseless? Isn't that nonsense? Now, doesn't that sound like darkness of the mind? Confusion, right? Now, they may genuinely believe it. Back to what Charlotte mentioned earlier. They may believe it all the way.
Some even identify as cats and dogs.
Right. There's people, I'm a cat, I'm a dog, that's happening. Now, it sounds silly because it is. It's nonsense. It is that weird. But we have a culture telling us, no, it's not weird. It's not weird. It makes sense. It makes sense. It makes sense. You're mean if you think it's weird. You just don't understand. Yeah, you just don't get it. It's the other way around. It's nonsense. For thousands of years, we've known what a man and a woman is. It's clear. And they think that all of a sudden in 2020 or whatever, we figured out, no, that's not how it works. No, like what has always been clear, back to what I mentioned earlier, in God's creation, we're trying to deny that now. And I want everybody to understand that is a spiritual issue. It's not an intellectual issue. It is a spiritual darkness. And it's sad. And I'm not listen, anybody who lives a trans lifestyle or something, I'm not mad at them, but I want them to know the truth. That they're being deceived. That God created them the way he intended to create them. He didn't mess up. They're not in the wrong body. They're not, none of that. That's all lies from the enemy. God has a specific plan and purpose for them that is good. And they need to look to that. And they need to look for that, right? Okay. He says, claiming to be wise, they became fools, and they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man, birds, four-footed animals, and reptiles. I want you to understand he's talking about idols, right? They turned against God. They turned to idols. They look for instead of relying on the Lord, they look for power in idols. Okay, this is still done today. If you know anybody who's looking at horoscopes, tarot cards, crystals, all these kinds of things, it's the same thing, just in a different package. Same issue, right? Neglecting God No, and I'm going to look for power here. Same thing. The packaging looks different from generation to generation, but it's all the same junk. Therefore, this is the point I was trying to get to very slowly. This is what happens. And this is why I say I think modern American culture, we're in this phase right now. It says, therefore, God delivered them over in the cravings of their hearts to sexual impurity, so that their bodies were degraded among themselves. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshipped and served something created instead of the Creator, who is praised forever. Amen. Now quick pause. It says he turned them over in their cravings to what? Specifically sexual impurity. Okay? Okay? Now let's keep reading. Let's go a little bit further. It's going to become more clear what we're talking about here. This is why God delivered them over to degrading passions. Now listen to some of these words. These words are important. I'm going to look up, real quick, I'm going to look up the NASB, just a more literal translation than the one I'm reading, if my computer will cooperate. And let me read it in one of the more literal, just so you can hear these words and fully see what God says about these things. Okay, I'm in verse 26. Okay, I'm going to read. It says, for this reason, God gave them over to degrading passions, for their women exchanged natural relations for that which is contrary to nature. Their women exchanged natural relations. Maybe we're not sure what that means yet. It becomes clear as you read. What would natural relations be? But he turned them over. He turned them over, and they exchanged those natural relations for something that goes against nature. In other words, unnatural. And likewise, verse 27, and likewise the men too abandoned natural relations with women and burned in their desire toward one another, males with males, committing shameful acts and receiving in their own persons the due penalty of their error. Is everybody clear? God's talking about homosexuality. Paul's writing about homosexuality. Okay? Notice some of the words associated with this. He said it's degrading, unnatural, or contrary to nature. It says they burn in their desire, committing shameful acts. So unnatural and shameful, and receiving, this is a different word there. In themselves, the due penalty for their error. So error. Is everybody clear? This is sin. Right? If it's shameful, it's error, it's unnatural, right? All these things. Notice also it's part of the judgment for turning against God. Earlier it said they exchanged the glory of God for created things. Right? Turn against him, turn to idols. The part where it says they exchanged the glory for created things, I think it's talking about other people right there, but I could be wrong. I think it's talking about sexual attraction toward other people. But then it makes it explicit once you get to verse 26 and 27. Okay, so it's talking about homosexuality. And just, verse 28, and just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a depraved mind, to do those things that are not proper. People having been filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, and evil, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, unfeeling, and unmerciful. And although they know the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. God gave them up to a depraved mind. Now, back to the point I was trying to make. I think modern American culture, we are in this phase right now. Okay? You go back to the 1960s, there was a sexual revolution. Okay? You follow that into the 2010s-ish, maybe even later. It's been pretty recent. I'd say there's a homosexual revolution, right? So the sexual revolution is, hey, have sex with whoever you want to have sex with. You don't have to be married to them. They don't have to, you know what I mean? And have with multiple people. You know, you don't have to be loyal to anyone. Go have fun. Go do your thing, right? So that was the 60s thing. In the 2000s, we started to include the same sex also. Doesn't even matter if they're the same sex as you.
Only in America.
Right? So that's the homosexual revolution. And then now we've gone beyond the idea of sex completely. There's no such thing as a man or a woman anymore because you get to decide whatever you are. So, all of that, and those are widespread ideas right now. Now notice it says, although they knew the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things were worthy of death, they not only do them, but also approve of them, of those who practice them. This is very important. You and I might not be living in sexual sin or even homosexual sin or a trans lifestyle or anything like that, and so you think, I'm not sinning. If you encourage others to do those things, still sinning. Approving of those who do it, still sinning. Because you're encouraging somebody to sin. You're pushing somebody forward into a lie, deeper into a lie.
Well, we know that's right? But nowadays, that's called a hate crime.
Right. And people are going to be upset. People are going to be upset about it. And okay, let me be very clear. We're also not supposed to be jerks. This is very important. Okay? We're not supposed to be yelling at, because listen, this is terrible stuff. There's a church, maybe somebody knows the name of it. There's a famous fundamental Baptist church, and it's only famous because of how hateful they've been toward the gay community. They will go and hold up signs that say God hates. I don't even like saying the word, the F word for homosexual. God hates, and they'll hold them up at, like telling people, like in parades and stuff, and you know what I mean? And it's just very full of hate. And that's wrong. That's for sure wrong. Do those people need to be ministered to? Absolutely. Is that the way to do it? I'd say absolutely not. It's good. I'd like to go ask those people, how many people have y'all won to the Lord that way? Because I have a feeling it's this much,
About the ones that also protest army.
Yes. So they don't believe in any type of war or any participation in the army or anything like that. So they'll go to soldiers' funerals there's family members grieving the death of their son who was killed as a Marine or whatever, and they're holding up signs that like God hates y'all, and just terrible stuff. I forget what the church is called, but they're known because they're that crazy, okay? But that's not supposed to be us. Okay, that's very clearly not supposed to be us. But we are supposed to be people of truth, and we're supposed to share truth with grace and with love. And so we are supposed to be looking for opportunities, right? How can I talk to that gay friend that I have? How can I, my family member who is convinced they're a woman, but they're very clearly not. You know what I mean? How do I have that conversation? We should be praying fervently for those people, asking God for the opportunities, and then pleading with the Lord that he will give us the right heart, not just right words. Because you can tear somebody apart in an argument, and that did nothing for them, for their heart. You know what I mean? You won the argument, and you get to walk away all proud, and they're still in their darkness. That's not a win. Does that make sense? This is very important. Our goal in those conversations should not be to prove them wrong. Our goal should be to point them to the truth, and the truth is Jesus. Amen. That's the goal. They need the Lord to open their eyes, and they just need somebody to share Christ with them, right? Now, are they guaranteed to say yes? No. They may continue to dig themselves deeper into their darkness, and we continue praying. And we continue asking the Lord for another opportunity. And Lord, if it can't be me, send someone else. You know what I mean? We should have a heart for those people, because the Lord wants, the Lord's will is that none should perish, his word says. That none should perish, but that all would come to repentance. Right, and so we can know all day long, hey, that's wrong. Yeah, they need to be rescued from that sin, just like you and I needed to be rescued from our sin. So, how did we get on this? This was not the point of tonight. Okay, back to Matthew. The reason I went there is because it says lawlessness will multiply. I was just pointing out, I think we're in one of those phases right now where lawlessness has multiplied in our culture. Okay, it says the love of many will grow cold, but the one who endures till the end will be delivered. This good news of the kingdom will be proclaimed in all the world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Now let's reread that verse 14 there. This good news of the kingdom will be proclaimed where? In the whole world. Mine says in all the world. As a testimony to all nations. And then the end will come. Now, if you've been coming for a while, you know that the word nations biblically is not synonymous with countries. We think of countries, right? We think of the United States as a nation, aka a country. But biblically, it has to do with ethnic. The Greek word is ethnos. It has to do with ethnic groups. So more people groups, not so much what country they live in, but the different people groups. So it says that one good way to read it would probably be the good news of the kingdom will be proclaimed in all the world as a testimony to all people groups. Every different ethnicity, every different, and then the end will come. Now, for those that don't know, there are still pockets around the world where the gospel has not been. There's still those tribes in the middle of the jungle somewhere, and there's still those, even in China, there's rural areas where the message has not gone. There's different pockets where the message has not gone. But most scholars agree that this verse, regardless of the debates we're going to talk about next week, most everybody agrees this is a very straightforward prophecy that the gospel will get to everybody, every people group, before the end actually comes. So you'll have believers who are very passionate, and it's not wrong, but they're very passionate about getting the gospel out all over the world. They're passionate about, in case y'all don't know, there's groups that like fundraise money to have the Bible translated into that weird language that only that tribe speaks. You know what I mean? And let's get some Bibles in that language. That means we got to go minister to them first. We have to go evangelize. We have to go talk to them first. We got to get some of them saved, and then we need them to help us translate into that language so that we can put Bibles in their hands and the gospel can spread in that community. Those efforts continue to happen around the world today. I take it very straightforward. I think that's what it means. I think it means the gospel is going to go everywhere before the end comes. I don't think there needs to be much discussion around that. But that's what Jesus prophesies. Now, we're at 7:50. Should I try to go into the next chunk? Let's pause. I've been talking a lot. Are there any questions of what we've covered so far? Let's do that. Are there any questions for what we covered so far? Yeah, we'll save the fights for next week about rapture and all that kind of stuff and how does it happen.
One of the things to keep in mind, Romans 1 was written to those called to be saints.
Right.
And it said multiple times in Romans 1, these people knew God. In Matthew 24, he said there's a great falling away. People that knew God, their love is going to grow cold. Mm-hmm. And the corollary, the Luke 21 version of Matthew 24, he says the people that are going to kill us are going to be the established church, just like the Pharisees, just like Methodists, Baptists, Catholics, and it's going to be the government.
Luke.
It's going to be these churches that are pawns of the government, like the Orthodox Church in Russia and the Catholic Church in Mexico. So the church is going to kill us because we can't forget the last months of what we've been reading. Matthew 21, 22, and 23, and remember, not until the 1500s do we even have chapters.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, this is all one.
With me?
Yeah.
So only 500 years we've had chapters.
Mm-hmm.
The most important words of all of creation. And so he's warning his closest friends 3 times in 12 verses, don't be deceived, as if they could be deceived.
Mm-hmm.
And they became the church leaders from there forward. So the people that are going to kill us are going to be the government-sponsored church, and he says they're going to kill you in Luke 21 in their synagogue, just like they did Jesus. The Jews, the people that thought they were the number one people of God in the whole world, are the ones that killed Jesus. And that exact same group, except now we don't call them Jews, we don't call them Pharisees, we call them Methodists, Baptists, Catholics, Presbyterians, Lutherans, and all that group. That same group that killed Jesus is going to be the group that kills us.
Where in Luke 21 are you talking about, brother? Oh, yeah, I see it. Verse 12. Let me read this little section.
Synagogues,
Mm-hmm.
and then by their rulers. So the religious rulers and their government rulers, exactly like the ones that killed Jesus, because that's exactly who he's talking to in Matthew 21, 22, and 23, and he didn't quit talking about it. In fact, this same kingdom of God message is mentioned to the Pharisees in Luke 17.
So let me read the Luke 21 section that you're talking about. So this is
Correlated, same account.
right. This is the same thing going on. Luke records it slightly differently. There's some extra details. So I'm going to read Luke 21. I'm going to start in verse 10. Then he told them, "Nation will be raised up against nation, and kingdom against kingdom." Does that sound familiar? Right? We just read that in Matthew, right? "There will be violent earthquakes and famines and plagues in various places, and there will be terrifying sights and great signs from heaven. But before all these things, they will lay their hands on you and persecute you. They will hand you over to the synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors because of my name. It will lead to an opportunity for you to witness. Therefore, make up your minds not to prepare your defense ahead of time, for I will give you such words and a wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict. You will even be betrayed by parents, brothers, relatives, and friends. Then they will kill some of you. You will be hated by everyone because of my name, but not a hair of your head will be lost. By your endurance, gain your lives." So, Brother Dave pointed out, because here there's more specifics, right? They will hand you over to the synagogues and to the prisons. You will be brought before the kings and governors. So the persecution comes from establishments, both supposedly religious and just governmental, right? Or supposedly holy, I should say, and governmental. So this is something that is interesting. I was talking with somebody just recently, kind of on a similar note here, that basically had gone through a situation where they saw a whole bunch of Christians, or at least people who say they're Christians, approaching things with a very, very unchristian mentality. And this person was confused by that and tried to have conversations about it, Say, well, hey, what, shouldn't we be trying to do this and this and this because God's word says, and it was like it just bounced off of them. You know what I mean? It's like nothing penetrated, and they didn't seem to care. And wanted to shut down basically what this person was saying. Now, it wasn't crazy. They didn't kill him, It wasn't like that kind of persecution. But they were very disheartened. They were very discouraged because they couldn't understand how people who profess Jesus would not just want to do what Jesus says. But notice, back to some of the verses that we're reading, it says that the love of many will grow cold. And even those, it says, but the one who endures till the end will be delivered. I think even those, even sometimes people, and this is where we need to guard our hearts. Even people who profess the name of Christ don't always know Christ, and are not walking in his ways, and are not wholly submitted to him. Sometimes they've fallen into the same trap as the religious leaders in Jesus' day of pride and and envy of anything that God, anything amazing that God is actually doing. Because that was one of the issues, right? The religious leaders hate Jesus because Jesus is going everywhere and people are flocking to him because he's performing miracles, he's casting out demons, he's healing people, he's doing all these things. They don't like it. And they're upset. And they attribute the obvious move of God, they actually attribute it to the devil. What a terrible, terrible thing. You were going to say something, Charlotte?
Well, I just reminded, it said in Matthew
Mm-hmm.
that they'll say, "Here is the Christ," and don't believe it. So, in regards to the denominational situation and
Mhm.
the establishment, I think that's happening for us a lot. Is that the gospel? This is Christ. The gospel is Jesus Christ. But then the gospel that we're preaching over and over again and then clinging to isn't really Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really who he is, but it's what each of these denominations have distilled it
Mm-hmm.
into, and then it deceives us. And we think we're doing the thing of God because it sounds like Jesus.
Yeah. So this is a common issue in denominational. I'm going to say denominationalism. Sometimes people grow up in these churches. They're taught certain things, and they're receiving their teachings more from that particular denominational bent than they are from just the scriptures. We're going to get into this more next week because I bet a bunch of us that's actually happened for. That's actually happened to us, and we may not be aware. We'll dig into that more next week. But even the people preaching and teaching often, well, they went. Let's say it's a Methodist church. They went to a Methodist seminary, or it's a Baptist church. They went to a Baptist seminary where they taught them specifically the doctrines that are held to in those denominations. And of course, if that's what you're taught, and they say, you see, it says here, here, and here, and here. A doctrine or a teaching can seem very well established. Well, look at all those verses. And this is why it's so important that we really, really learn God's word, because from just those verses, yes, you can be very easily convinced of that teaching, as long as you leave out this other verse and verses. You know what I mean? If they only show you those, and those are the ones you focus on, that's what. Oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. There are things that I believed wholeheartedly growing up, because it's what I was taught. And this sounds bad to say, but there are things that I believe way less now, or that I'm way less sure of, because I actually know the Bible more now. Like the more that I've been in myself, I'm less sure of those things I was taught. Now here's an issue, and I hope this doesn't become an issue for you. If I never dug in myself, I'd just be still believing some of those things. And some of those things I've completely flipped on. I'm like, oh, that was just wrong. Like, I know, because look what it says here, you know? And others, I'm like, well, I think it's slightly off, you know? But some of them, it's like, no, that was just flat out incorrect. But if I never dug in, and this is the warning to us, if you never dig in, you're liable to believe stuff just because James said it at church. And it shouldn't be that way. What's wrong with y'all? Mute your phone. No, it's just kidding. I know it's the Amber. Mine's probably going off right there. Hopefully.